I got the sound because I left the cap on.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Nick here with Mind Over Motor, and in the last few months here, I've driven a couple of Camaros, a '69 SS 396, and a much newer, well, new gen SS 1LE. I've actually driven two of those on two different occasions, and it just, I haven't really done too much with Camaros. I had the previous gen in as a rental car when I went to Amelia Island a few years ago, and I've driven like the previous, like the late '90s one very briefly and stuff. So I mean, I'm not really like a huge Camaro guy, but it's just interesting to get to experience these two, like the old and the new. The previous one from the actual muscle car era, the golden years. And then Chevy's newest offering is pretty crazy, the differences and everything like that. So I guess let's start with the old one. This was my first period muscle car that I'd ever driven. I think I'd driven a couple other little cars from that era, like the 60s and the 70s. But this was the first proper muscle car, and the spec on this thing was just perfect. It was orange with black and like a black interior with the like a pattern on the seats, and most of all, it was a manual transmission, 4 on the floor. It had the 396 with the 325 horsepower spec, and it also had a fabric roof, and it was just, it was, if you're gonna drive a Camaro for a little bit and really have that experience, this is exactly the car you would want to drive. It's really just kind of making that whole fantasy come true. So I was blown away by many things and surprised by a few things. I think the biggest surprise is you hear all the glory stories from back in the day, the performance of the muscle cars and everything like that, and you got to realize, like, things have come a long way. And in modern terms, on modern roads, this thing is it's 1969, and the technology is different, and actually the definition of horsepower has changed. So in modern terms, this is not really a 325 horsepower car. Back then, I think they rated them with no accessories or anything. It was just the engine on a dyno. But today, like, we measure the engine hooked up to everything, and then tuners measure at the wheels, which is what the car puts out. So it was 325 horsepower, with nothing on it. Today, like in real terms, in apples to apples modern terms, it's probably like 240, 250 horsepower equivalent. You have to kind of have that in your mind that it's not going to feel like a Camaro V6, basically. Because a modern Camaro V6, they say, has about that much power. And this is not that. It's an older car with older definitions of what it had. So you need to sort of adjust it. Now, that said, it's very torquey, and it has good performance. I'd say it's like maybe roughly like Focus ST performance, maybe a little less. But it's in that kind of neighborhood in terms of the amount it actually moves. But honestly, these cars at this point are totally about the driving experience, and there's not much like it these days. You get in this car, and we say drivers' cars are like analog these days and stuff, but this thing, dude, everything in this car is mechanical. There's nothing helping you. Every single thing, you are driving the car, you are really controlling everything, and everything's giving you feedback. It's carbureted. It's a totally different experience than the much newer cars, and that alone, the driving experience of this thing is really special. You're really connected. You're really engaged in it, and my God, the sound, like the constant sound of like that V8 rumble, like whether you're idling, is like bloom 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 bloom, like, or you're like on it, and if you get more of that roar. It just, and again, being carbureted, it just sounds freaking amazing. It just, it's a very special driving experience, especially in the modern context, when so many cars that are really, really fast, but they're generally pretty tame in terms of the experience side, and unless you modify them. There's a few exceptions out there these days, but by comparison to this, oh my god! And of course, there's the smell of the fuel you get a little bit and everything, and there's really nothing modern that's like this car, exactly in terms of experience. Now, things I didn't really like about it. The biggest one was like the ergonomics, I would say. It just, the seat, the level of adjustability that has come across over the years is huge. And in these, like, it was just the seat moves up, the seat moves back, and it only moves back so much. You really, like, I'm 5'11" and kind of a big guy. Like, I couldn't really get comfortable in this thing. I moved the seat all the way back, and it was still, like, very close to the wheel. And, so I kind of just had to deal with it for the amount of time I was driving, which was, like 20, 30 minutes. Not even 20, 30 minutes, probably like 15 to 20 minutes. But so it was really just a taste. But, I was able to get comfortable enough to enjoy it. But it was really, compared to the experience of driving a normal car where every little thing adjusts and you can make it just how you want. Whoa, you're really not comfortable in these things. The design of the interior and everything has come a long, long way. So yeah, the kind of relative lack of comfort was one issue I had with it. The other thing is just a lot of it, I guess, is just the older style of building the car. The new Camaros are literally have come thousands of miles in terms of like their dynamic ability. This car doesn't have any assists or anything like that. And, there was a time going around like a slight bend in the road, but like a sweeping kind of bend, but it really wasn't tight. And, our guy who was riding with us told me to like, really watch the throttle. Cause like the fact that you could spin at like, really not that fast of a speed, but there's just not that much tire on this car for the torque it has and everything and the weight balance. It's mostly in the front. It's not as well sorted of a car or an approach. The approach is not as well sorted to building it. In terms of performance, they've come so far. That's one of the biggest differences too. Is like, if you were in a new Camaro, you could almost floor it around that turn and not have any issues with the amount of tire and the suspension that thing has. So it's a different driving experience. You really got to be kind of careful. I beat on it as much as, I thought I kind of could. And even still, it was like the guy said that, he said there was a little bit of coolant coming out the back. Cause I was opening it up. I was seeing what it had and everything like that. And he was, we were watching the temperature gauge and everything. But, one thing is just, you got to be kind of more careful with these cars for sure. It's an antique at this point. In terms of the real driving, I don't know. It's probably not for me in my mindset of like, I just want to go out and, get what there is to have out of the car, the experience, and use the performance it has. Those cars take more of like a light touch, I think, at this point. These classics, like the genuine period classics. On the road, I would probably be more interested in a resto mod or just have one of the newer ones for really driving it. But it was interesting just to experience the past and the muscle car era itself. I get the appeal. It's very, these things are much more like cruisers than like the modern Camaros. The modern Camaros have really turned much more into sports cars, and really even really serious track cars. So these, I guess we'll go into the 1LE now. So fast forward, I guess almost 50 years, and the Camaro is developed on the Nürburgring. The chassis is tuned there. And again, the times I've driven it, I cannot say that I've come anywhere near the handling limits. I'm just, kind of having a little bit of fun on the street or whatever. But you just get the sense, like, even when you do throw it into a turn on the road, like, you are, like, not anywhere near what that car could do. And you're going pretty fast. Like, I think, on most back roads and stuff, the Camaros, you just couldn't. You could be going triple the speed limit and not even testing the car's abilities. And that's interesting. It's an unbelievable difference, like the handling and the focus on handling. You don't get the sense that you're pushing it at all, like the car. And in a way, the new one's like so competent and so composed and so just not lifting a finger that like it's almost like less exciting in a way than like a car with like lower limits, because you don't get the sense that you're really pushing it. It's just like, oh, that's all you got. But you're also going really, really fast. So it kind of has to rely, from my perspective, it has to rely on other aspects of the driving experience to be exciting on the road, fun road speeds, but not like insane type of reckless speeds. With the 1LE package and stuff and everything, like that's really a track car, and it wants to be on a track where you can really push hard. But I mean, how crazy is that we've gone from, a car that can barely handle it all and really was just more of like a cruiser and a fast straight line car, to something that's so freaking capable. And what's crazy to me also with the new Camaros is they're not light cars. These are big cars. It feels big on the road, but it's so tight and so just planted. Like you just have this sense that it's like a boat, like a big boat, but it's fast and can turn really well. It's very, very capable. But otherwise, like on the road, the engine, this new LT1 motor is it's really great. That thing it's got this nice sensation of just torque everywhere, whether you're low in the range, high in the range, and then the more you rev it, the better it is. Like it really gives you a lot of the experience. In terms of lineage between the two, the 69 and I think it was 2017, 2018. The biggest lineage that I could feel between them that is the same is kind of the way the power comes on and the feeling of the powertrain. Obviously, the new gearbox is a lot crisper and more direct feeling than the old one. But the way the engine comes on when you get on the gas is very similar. And the kind of character of the sound, the way the sound like instantly surrounds you, of that like V8 rumble to roar, they both definitely share. And there's a bit of lineage there, but then at a certain point it's just like the new one is just so much more capable, and the ergonomics is vastly improved. When you get in the old one, it was seats, but it was almost like a bench seat and then the front two move. It was kind of going for that. It was like a lot of room, everything like that. You get in the new one, and it's really focused. The seats have like heavy bolstering, and the car just, you get in it, and it just feels driver focused. It feels like a car that's ready to go to the racetrack. And also it's pretty nice. The one of them was a 2SS, and that was actually a pretty well equipped interior. It's got nice like Alcantara and leather and everything everywhere. It's a pretty nice car for $50,000 or so. And yeah, I mean, I'm impressed. They've really come a long way in the design and the build quality as well. I will say though that the old one, the old style, the vintage style, like. The new Camaros look really good, and they look badass. And I love how they, they mix the old style, like it's a Camaro. They kind of lost me in the Catfish era, where it's just like, whatever. But the new ones have that. They have enough of the classic style to look good and look like a Camaro. But, I think there's nothing like the original for curb appeal. Especially like an orange color or something. It's the daddy, and it's commands respect in terms of being a style piece. But in terms of like dynamics and everything, they're just totally different cars. I'm glad they haven't tamed it down too much, because it's a car that really should never be tamed. Like the day they make like an electric Camaro is the day that the Camaro's dead. You can't. That's what a Camaro is. And that's why I also have like issues with the 4-cylinder and the V6. Like, yeah, sure, they're good cars to an extent, but like, dude, like you get in these old ones, the rumble of the V8, that is the defining characteristics of that experience. And if you don't have that, I don't think you're really in a Camaro. You're in something else. But it's not a muscle car. It's not a muscle car experience without the rumble of a V8. And the new one really delivers. And my God, it's got a lot of power. Like, you get going real quick. They claim it's like 455. I've heard it's a little underrated. It's a little closer to that at the wheels, so it's a little bit more closer to 500. I've heard. But man, it for such a big car, and even without that handicap of it being a big car, it's just what a performer. Like, it really is impressive. And for $50,000 it's pretty insane. So yeah, I mean, I've gotten to drive these two cars, and again, I've never really been like a huge Camaro like fan. I mean, I've always liked them. I respect them. When I drove the previous Gen SS, I think it was a 2011. I was really impressed with how they made that thing handle, and that it's definitely a better, well-rounded car than the older ones were. But this new one's even taking it further. And I got to be honest, like, of all the muscle cars, I think the Camaro I would give the most improved from like the original era, because now they're like, I mean, they're muscle cars, they're modern muscle cars, but they're also genuinely capable, high performance handling cars. And not to take anything away from some of the Mustangs and stuff, and I mean, the Challengers are more traditional style muscle cars. The newer ones supposedly can handle a little better. I haven't driven one of them, but the older one, I drove the SRT 392, was a boat. And they're not as crisp as the Camaro. And the Mustangs, I don't know. Like, I think your basic Camaro SS is going to outperform your basic Mustang GT. Certainly in terms of driving dynamics and just being capable on the track. Now, whether you're talking to a 1LE versus a Shelby GT350, I don't know. I'd have to have seat time in both in a close proximity to tell. But I mean, it's GM, when GM gets their dynamics right, they really hit it hard, and that's one area. That's the biggest area where it's improved. They just made a very, very serious car. So yeah, two different experiences I've had over the last year. It was interesting just to see, the old and the new and how they kind of have evolved. But it's not really the evolution of it. It's really just like, here's the old one, jump to the new one. And it's a pretty drastic change. I think it was very interesting to get to drive the original. I'm glad I did that. But I've definitely realized it isn't really my thing in terms of my own personal use. I'm much more of a fan of the newer style. I think everything is improved from my perspective, except for maybe just the analog feeling. But in exchange for that, you get like ergonomics. You get a way more capable, way smoother experience. But you got to appreciate the original for sure. I mean, it's an experience I'm glad I got to have a taste of. So you can at least see where it comes from, and you at least know what people are talking about and where they're coming from with the muscle car thing, the original. But yeah, for me, it's definitely cemented the fact that I would much rather have a newer car and be able to beat the shit out of it. Because the new one really it'll take a beating. It's a solid platform, heavy performance, man. Like, it's just unbelievable. So the amount that you could thrash the new one versus an old one, I would definitely take the new one. Give up a little bit of style, but you get a lot back dynamically. But again, it's sort of like comparing apples and oranges. I just thought it was a fun comparison, given that, the old and the new. How often do you get to drive the old and the new in relatively close proximity and really get to see the lineage of, one of these iconic cars over the years? So, yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the Camaro. I don't know where it stands, if it's like my favorite of the current muscle cars. I think dynamically it certainly would be, like in terms of putting it in my garage, like to have every day. It's probably the car I would choose as a driver's car. Maybe the Shelby. If I could get a Shelby or a 1LE, I don't know. I'd really have to test drive them both on the same day and see which one floated my boat a little bit more. But I don't know, man. The Camaro, I think, again, like a General SS, I think is better than a General GT. So, and then the Challenger for me is just like style points. I'm I'm not really a straight line guy, and like I would love a Hellcat, like a purple Hellcat, but I think I'm just too much of a handling guy that like if I was really gonna put one in my garage, it would probably be a Camaro or maybe the Shelby if I could get one for the same exact money. But yeah, it's cool, definitely cool. So with that, that's the end of this podcast, and I will see you guys next time. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow at mindovermotor_official on Instagram, and check out mindovermotor.com. Have a good one.